Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be spitting in the face of our least favorite pair of two digits, the two fingers, with a pure Madness build. We already know that Madness has an extremely deadly status buildup, but we're going to have a couple of other tools at our disposal to really boost the damage to basically ludicrous levels with just different types of buff stacking. So the first type of buff stacking we're going to look at is with our talisman. So we have the Godfrey icon, which is going to boost charged spells or incantations, so that's going to apply to several of our incantations. We also have both Frenzied Flame seals, and we'll have both of them equipped at the same time, but we'll be two-handing ours for maximum damage. We also can run the Ritual Sword Talisman if we're at full health, or the Phlox Canvas Talisman, which also greatly raises the potency of incantations. And if we're not at full health, or if we want to switch off our equip load for something less so we can get that fourth talisman slot, we can switch over to a secondary Canvas Talisman, which is going to stack with the first Canvas Talisman. So with all those talismans, you may be thinking, wow, this build is kind of broken. And to that I say, you really haven't seen anything yet. So we also have the Mixed Physic here, that we can use the Flame Shroud and Crack tier to boost our fire damage, which is going to be associated with our incantations. And then we also have the Opaline Hard tier, which is going to kind of counter the effects of Howl of Shabriri, which we're going to use as a way to boost our damage very greatly. But we also have the kind of drawback that we're going to take more damage. So using the Opaline Hard tier is going to kind of counter that effect. And then we also have Golden Vow, which does stack as well. So looking at all these things together, we can just go ahead and go for a Madness Snipe on a random bird. We'll charge it so we get the Godfrey icon to take effect. And we see 5,600 damage just on some random PvE. Quite substantial. We also can take a look at our AR. We're at 1,100 damage on our Vyke Spear, and that's going to be a nice segue into just understanding the other half of this build. So Power Stance Great Spears are already very strong. We already kind of understood the fact that we have fantastic buff stacking when it comes to our incantations and our Mixed Physic, but we can also go ahead and go for some swaps with our talismans using the Spear Talisman, the Shard of Alexander, and the Claw Talisman. And this is going to boost our counter damage with, especially like the Crouch Pokes. We'll also have jumping attacks. If you get that as a counter damage hit, the Claw Talisman and the Spear Talisman are both going to be taking effect. And then we have this lovely Ash of War that is a great way to zone our opponents and just deliver quite a bit of damage or madness buildup. Both are going to be useful. It's just very strong, borderline silly. Looking at the stats for this build, this is going to be a fairly standard Faith Dexterity build that has an equal split of 41 points between both those stats. It's going to be level 138. We're going to have 58 Vigor, 28 Endurance, and then 16 Strength, so we can Power Stance the Vyke Spears. Also, we will be using the Great Jar's Arsenal Talisman, so we boost our equip load, and that allows us to wear this kind of Giga Vyke armor, which I very much enjoy. It's a mixture of the Fingerprint Helm and armor with the Fire Prelate Gauntlets and Greaves. That pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say about the build. I also would like to note that Power Stance Great Spears haven't really made an appearance on this channel, but the game's been out long enough where I feel like I can start having fun and just messing around with weapons that I might have felt were a little bit too strong or just like slightly less honorable than other things. But I don't know. There's an argument to be made to limit yourself, but I think there's also an argument to be made about just playing the game and having a good time and trying things that you think are fun or interesting. So that's kind of where that's at. If you have any questions, definitely let me know in the comments, and let's go ahead and take a look at the invasions and the duels. Alright, so jumping into our first invasion, we're going to be playing against a group of 3, and we've already buffed a little bit, but we're going to go for Frenzied Burst since our opponents are running away from us in mostly a straight line. Frenzied Burst doesn't have very good tracking. It's not the same as something like Loretta's Great Bow, which will kind of go to either side and potentially catch an opponent that's not strafing fast enough or at the right angle. And that means that when your opponents are running away from you or standing still are kind of the best times to use Frenzied Burst, since the tracking is a little lackluster. Now, we do start going after one of the Phantoms here with Power Stance Great Spears, and that's definitely going to be a good option. You know, it's a phenomenal turn and burn and really delivers a lot of burst damage. And we are seeing a lot of physical damage here in the process. So using something like Black Flame Protection is going to be a great option since that's going to negate 40% of the damage that we would normally take from physical damage. So we've got that on our mind, and we want to make sure that that buff is applied as often as possible. We'll also use the Vyke's Spear, Ash of War to zone our opponents, kind of prevent them from moving forward through the level and give ourselves a little bit of space and time. You'll also note that I walk into a room and just do a very quick 360 to try to understand where my escape routes are. I want to know where to position myself so that if the pressure becomes a little bit too much, I have a way to get out. And again, we're going to use the zoning technique of Vyke's Spear to just discourage these other two players from coming after me, and that allows me to get a really nice turn and burn with Vyke's Spear's Ash of War again on this other player. So that's an Ash of War that really does leave you potentially open to a backstab, but if you free aim it, you're less likely to get backstabbed. You can kind of surprise your opponent with where you end up, and that's going to be a great option. Now, we do switch back over to the Flame of Frenzy incantation, and that's going to be a great way to get at least a little bit of chip status buildup. And that's something we should also keep in mind when running a build like this, is that if you can even deliver phantom hits or just little bits of status buildup, it means you're more likely to successfully deliver the full Madness proc and do quite a bit of damage, as well as leave your opponent open to another hit. So we also go ahead and reapply Black Flame's protection, which is obviously important against this setup we're seeing with mostly physical damage. And we also will note that RKR, or Royal Knight's Resolve, is being applied to the Phantom with the Great Hammer. So that can do quite a bit of damage, especially with a jumping attack, and we need to be worried about that. We're seeing the Phantom here kind of hanging out in the corner, so we feel like we can punish that with a nice delayed jumping attack. You'll note that we free aim that at the last minute, and that's going to allow us to do the damage we need to and also get the connection with that hit. So we just kind of end up in a one-on-one with the host. We go for a ravioli step and then do manage to knock that opponent down with just a single hit with Vyke's. It's also worth noting that even though you're power stancing Vyke's Spear, since you're not really getting much scaling from strength, you don't need to two-hand it to go for just the one spear moveset, and incorporating the one spear moveset is going to be a very strong option. Having the sweep that comes out as a crouch attack is really nice, and potentially having the jumping light attack as something that's slightly better ranged or slightly faster. It has more active frames on the way down than something like a jumping L1. So really incorporating those things into your moveset is going to be a strong way to play with this weapon. We'll also note that we have another Vyke Spear player, and I really enjoyed seeing other Madness builds while running this Madness build, because you kind of play a game of chicken between your different Madness build-up where, you know, whoever hits the last Madness proc will probably win. I also did run the Physic, which allows you to have infinite FP and a short period of time with extra poise, so we can see that taking effect there, and that's going to be a very strong way to run Unendurable Frenzy. It's kind of a gimmicky move, so I didn't use it too much, but you can see there we did get the jumping attack on the player with Vyke's Spear, winning that kind of game of chicken, and then successfully taking care of the host. This next invasion is going to also involve some buff stacking, so we can see the use of the Madness Snipe hitting 1k damage, which is phenomenal, and this is definitely a gank setup in Limgrave. So what we want to do is hopefully waste some of the FP of our opponents and also just put ourselves in a strategic advantage in terms of our placement in the environment. So going for something like Madness Snipes from the top of this little area that has a very kind of small focal point in terms of where you can approach it from. You can only really get onto this platform from that jump that I used to initially get on this platform, which means that it's going to function as a funnel for everybody if they want to approach me to deal, you know, non-projectile damage. And that is extremely useful. It's also going to put them in recovery frames if they go for the jump. And we can oftentimes punish those recovery frames, and there you can see that I try to time my jumping attack with when they're going to land their jump. And you're not always going to have the opportunity to do that, but you'll also note that it's a little bit of a struggle for players that aren't familiar with that jump to get up here. And that really like breaks up the flow of how they might approach you in a ganking situation. They can't aggress all at the same time. And because we have Barrier of Gold on here, we can really do a great job of just negating their projectile damage. Barrier of Gold is a very quick cast. We can see that the one host tries to go for the Rain of Arrows attack with the Great Bow. We also see some more magic projectiles coming our way, and we're really just trying to frustrate our opponents, making them do something overly aggressive and maybe feel like they didn't approach this in the right way. If they regret their decision to come at me, then that's great. That's exactly what we want and what we need to successfully win a gank. So this one player does make it onto the platform, and I'm super focused on them. And because I have Barrier of Gold, I know that a lot of the incoming magic damage is not going to be such an issue. Now, maybe paying attention to it a little bit more and trying to go for some dodge rolls periodically would have been a better way to go, but we do actually see a successful kill there against the Phantom. And now we have the host that's rune-arced and using Quickstep on a Zweihander, which is a little bit scary just because the poke out of the Quickstep is going to be quite strong, but we're able to delay our attacks until after we think they're going to end their quick step, but before they're able to deliver their hit. So that's a very strong way to kind of counter quick step, and really the only option is just to predict the timing to be a little bit late. And there we can see in the background the other Phantom struggling to get onto the platform and help the host. So a great way to handle a gank in Limgrave is just to kind of apply that technique. And here we can see what happens when you go for some of the buffs we mentioned at the beginning of the video and go for a Madness Snipe that, you know, lands successfully. Just a quick vigor check on the host. Not too much, you know, extra commentary needed there. So next up we have a group of 3. We quickly use our Flame of Frenzy incantation and swap our talismans over, because now we're going for the Power Stance Great Spear setup, which is just quite strong. We also have Barrier of Gold in the mix, which I definitely recommend against this type of magic spam, and we're able to go for a Sleep Pot and successfully isolate our host here, as the Phantom I thought fell off the edge, but they actually did land on the stairs below. So that is a way to kind of progress through this level, is to go for that little jump off to the left side. And the host is being fairly aggressive, and they have not joined back up with their Phantom. I'm curious if they were, you know, in voice chat together, because there was some communication here. I was very surprised when they actually did jump down here, and this becomes extremely sketchy extremely quickly. So we do see that magic damage coming in, as well as some attacks with the Cypher Peta, and we almost get frame trapped where we can't really move to either side, but eventually we do kind of sneak out of there with almost no HP. Now we go for some kind of disciplined healing, where we wait until we get around the corner before we go for that heal. And here we throw one Sleep Pot, which is going to put us in a great spot to go for our incantations, and that's going to be enough to kind of one-shot the host in that moment, who wasn't running too much HP either. And we do land one crouch attack with the PSGS, go for a jumping attack, but it's a little bit too late. Now, this next invasion was an absolute doozy. I invaded these people several times before, unsuccessfully, and I was really itching to kind of come out with a win against them. Now, one of the reasons I was unsuccessful was the setup that they were running. So this player with the Power Stance Greatswords, or Ultra Greatswords, there's a little bit of suspicious stuff going on with, you know, their level potentially. So for one thing, when they did land a jumping attack on me, it did about maybe 1,500 damage or more, which is quite substantial. You know, typically that's not what you see. I mean, it's a very strong weapon set, but it's kind of terrifying. We also have a rune-arced host that's running Moonveil, so for that reason I'm running Barrier of Gold, just assuming that Moonveil is a little bit harder to dodge when you're dealing with incoming damage from other players, and the slow moveset associated with the Power Stance Ultra Greatswords is going to at least allow me to dodge that type of stuff more frequently. And we're seeing a ton of aggression from this group, so it's really important to either use something like the Flame of Frenzy to just kind of to break their stance and discourage them from running into you over and over again, and delivering chip damage along the way during kind of a tactical retreat is going to be important, because all the weapons involved here can do so much damage. We've seen only a couple hits connect from our opponents, but really my kind of understanding from previous encounters with this group was that getting hit is going to likely result in a very quick death. And we'll see here some of their hits connect pretty soon, and it almost kills me in like 2 hits. So, you know, really a high-risk situation to be in, but we are gradually baiting our opponents towards some PvE. So here we get a couple quick hits on this Phantom, and they have huge damage potential, but they also have like maybe 2,200 HP, which is very high. And we also see them soft swap over to a seal, but in the process of soft swapping, we also see the fingerprint shield, which means that they are running quite a bit of endurance to be able to wield both these massive swords as well as a fingerprint shield, all of which have very high weight. And so that kind of clues us in that they're probably over-leveled. Now, what happens at this point is we almost die from just like 2 hits between 2 phantoms, but we have the dragon that allows us to isolate our opponent. And once we can isolate our opponent here, we're able to very, very quickly do the damage that we need with the Power Stance Great Spears. So a couple hits, some of the phantom procs delivering the Madness proc, and you know, we're able to just kind of take a look and see how many runes we get. So 100k at, you know, level 125 or 138. You know, our opponent there was around level 400, and then we see the next set of runes coming in, and that opponent was around 600. So extremely over-leveled phantoms, Rune Arctos, and Moonveil. Just a very strong challenge in general, and a situation in which we needed to play very carefully. And having something like Power Stance Great Spears turn this from impossible into possible, in my opinion, especially Vyke Spears, which are quite a bit of fun. So, you know, it turns into a one-on-one with the host. They're still doing a fair bit of damage with Moonveil despite Barrier of Gold, and we can see here we don't go for the jumping attack, which we probably should have. Just muscle memory wasn't quite there, and we really wanted to take advantage and at least deliver some hits. So we go for a charged attack with just one of the Vyke Spear. And at this point, our opponent is out of HP, which means they're going to start backpedaling. And this isn't a phenomenal setup for catching opponents if they're like very determined to run away. Switching to an HTS or just a regular thrusting sword is probably more beneficial. And at this point, we do get a co-invader, and just kind of based on their playstyle, they do feel like they may be a bit of a liability. We can see them go for their Ash of War while I'm pretty much right next to them. So we're trying to give them some space. Our main goal here is to not lose after, you know, we've done quite a bit of damage to 2 phantoms that were very clearly over-leveled, and we can see what happens when Moonveil is uninhibited by Barrier of Gold, as this phantom just gets hit for 700 damage over and over again, and it's, you know, pretty absurd. So here we finally get a running attack on the host and do manage to come out with the W. We give them an applause, and here that phantom, or the co-invader rather, we can see what a liability they were as they go for a running attack against us. So giving them space was absolutely the right call. This next invasion is just kind of a silly one. We have a fat rolling phantom here, and we don't roll out of the one-handed greatsword attacks like we should have. So playing a little bit too aggressively here perhaps, but we do have Power Stance Great Spears, so going for a crouch attack is going to put us in a great spot to turn this into a one-on-one. And here, you know, I kind of just wanted to go for something a little bit fun. So we go ahead and use some of our incantations, and then what we are going to be going for is the Inescapable Frenzy incantation, which is an extremely fun way to end a fight, especially if it does in fact end the fight, and we're not trying to push our opponent off the edge with some of the Power Stance Great Spears, and we give them some space so they can kind of get reoriented. They don't go for a regular Crimson Flask heal, so they just go for their FP heal, and so we start two-handing our seal, since that's going to do a little bit more damage. We've got Inescapable Frenzy all queued up, and we go for it, and it connects, but the grab attack does not, you know, kind of complete. So that is something that can absolutely happen, but we're, you know, going to go for it one more time, and this time we do successfully grab it for around 650 damage, and just, you know, finish off that opponent. Now, this last invasion is going to be a very fun one as well, and we have kind of an interesting hitbox moment where we go for our Flame of Frenzy, and in that motion, our head kind of goes down, and our hitbox goes down as well. So we see the Bloodhound step into crouch attack from the Nagakiba here, and it goes right over our head, and we're able to deliver a nice flawless one-shot with the Flame of Frenzy. So we give a nod and thought to just try to think about what really happened there and move on with our day. All right, so moving on to the duel portion of the showcase, we are going to be running mostly just the one-handed Vyke Spear rather than Power Stance Great Spears, and then we're also going to try to incorporate our, you know, incantations a little bit. So a little bit more variety than just Power Stance Great Spears, which are very unpopular in the arena. However, I did find that this build in the arena was not as strong as some other builds. I think this is a build that really shines in the invasions, but, you know, in duels, it's less strong, and I think that's part of the reason that you don't really see Madness builds in, you know, ladder or competitive dueling contexts, because there's just stronger setups, and something like a Shunter or, Power Stance Claymans or, just some of these other setups that have a little bit more variety to them are going to do quite better. And if you have an opponent that understands the way to kind of counter Madness, I mean, especially the Madness build-up, then you're going to be in a great spot. But in this particular duel, we are able to actually land an Escapable Frenzy, so we missed it once and then baited them in for an attack, and we were able to get that off just a little bit more quickly than their attack came out and come out with a W. So that is a very fun thing to do in the arena. I don't think anybody is a huge fan of it necessarily, but when it connects, it's very, very cool. So next up we have a Greatsword player, and they're going to probably be going for the true combos associated with the Banished Knight Greatsword, so a jumping attack followed up by a free aimed attack and potentially a third free aimed attack. That can be a very strong way to go, and we're just trying to be patient, keep our Madness damage high, and as we can see, we get the Madness proc, and we're able to combo that into an incantation. So next up, we do have a Shunter player, and we do need to be very careful about this setup because Shunter can very quickly vortex you, and I would say the damage is going to be higher with their spear than my spear, but we're going to, go for some neutral jumps, try not to be too predictable, and really be reactive to the different attacks that they have. So the crouch attacks are going to come out extremely quickly. If you're patient and kind of understand the playstyle associated with Shunter, then you're going to be in a better spot. And we also go for some of our incantations just to kind of mix things up a little bit and also continue to deliver some of those Madness procs. So here we go for our Ash of War. Absolutely poor decision, and we get punished quite hard for it. But, the game is not over yet. We're still kind of playing with it, and we did deliver a decent amount of Madness buildup in the process. And we're trying to both stay aggressive so that they don't have time to use a Ballast without getting punished, and we're also trying not to get hit for that last bit of HP. So I think they were playing a little bit maybe too aggressively, just kind of seeing how little health I had. They were one shot away from killing me, but I really try to stay patient. Here we get a hilarious succession of backstabs. None of them connect, which is just classic. And we do get a couple more hits in. Finally, we get a phantom hit that is going to deliver the Madness proc, and we're able to land a charged attack for the win. So nice kind of comeback there against a very strong setup and a very skilled player. Moving on, we're going to see a Katana setup, and this player is going to be going for just a little bit of a buff here. I was running a setup that felt a little bit less honorable, so if players wanted to use BHS against me or whatever, I was not going to be upset. I know that what I'm running is going to be unpopular, and we'll just kind of roll with the punches and just kind of take whatever setup that anybody else brings our way. So we do see Eleanor's Pole Blade come out, and it's going to do a lot of blood loss buildup, which is, something to very much keep an eye on. However, we are going to be able to potentially punish their long Ash of War with one of our incantations. So Flame of Frenzy is a great way to take up space, and when you don't really know where your opponent's going to go exactly, it can kind of be a good way to just zone them a bit and get some of that extra Madness buildup. And here we do deliver the Madness proc and get the charge attack for the win. And moving on to our next duel here, we're going to have a player that is potentially light rolling. They're definitely not running very heavy looking armor, and seeing an opponent that's not running heavy armor is going to be pretty nice. So this was one of the duels that I was running Power Stance Great Spear, so I definitely did give that a try, and our opponent is going for a lot of parries against it. So I don't really recommend that as a play style. I recommend trying to punish things with neutral jumps, especially like the crouch attack is going to be something that's punishable with the neutral jumps. However, we do get a connection there as they go for some parries, and we get the Madness proc in the process and come out with the W. So nothing too much to say there. Running equipment that allowed for, more focus might have been the way to go. This next player is running the HTS, and we're not doing a ton of damage with each hit, but we are, pretty successfully delivering Madness buildup. And at this point, they're pretty low on health. We go for a free aim, just trying to predict where they're going to roll. They roll straight back rather than off to the side, which is kind of what I was hoping they would do. But, going for the free aim, I still think is the right play, since it's going to, confuse your opponent and potentially, be less predictable than something like a lockdown attack with either the Vyke Spear, Ash of War, or the incantation. And they are going for a lot of running heavies, which are not too bad to dodge. And here we get a little bit greedy. We're hoping for the flawless, but we go for a running heavy attack, which is going to leave you susceptible to a backstab. Rust Bucket has a great video that I just helped him out with a little bit, did a little bit of a collaboration. So if you want to check that out, it talks about backstab susceptibility quite well. So we don't actually deliver any of the chip damage we were hoping to from the 3 hitboxes associated with the running heavy, and we get backstabbed in the process. So no flawless, but we do end up getting just kind of a final poke and come out with a victory against a very strong setup as well. HTS is not a weapon to, take lightly. So next up we have a player running dual Rivers of Blood, so a fun setup there. We always love to see it. And they're definitely going for a lot of the jumping attacks, which are going to potentially deliver a lot of damage and a lot of blood loss buildup. And they do switch over to a single cross Naginata, which is kind of fun. The moveset is a little bit unusual, and I get caught for a couple of hits just being fairly unfamiliar with that particular moveset, but we are able to kind of quickly adapt. They go for some attacks that are a little bit odd, and we get some madness procs that are going to be enough to do a bit of damage. And then here we dodge around Piercing Fang, go for a fully charged heavy because we notice they're rolling kind of in a single direction backwards, which is going to be a great option. And we come out with the victory in the final duel to showcase. As always, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate all the support, and if you have any build recommendations or questions, definitely let me know in the comments below. But yeah, that's all I've got, so have a good one.